Plaintiff, are you ready to proceed with closing?
Yes, Your Honor. Stop signs tell us to slow down and stop. They tell us to be cautious, to be on guard. They tell us to look left. They tell us to look right. And they tell us to pay attention to whatever's around us at any given moment. However, we learned today that Worcester High School did not slow down. They did not stop. They did not pay attention when stop signs and red flags were right in front of them. And because of their carelessness, their callousness, and utter lack of concern, Ava Johnson is dead. Now, we heard from Blake Davis, the Worcester High School guidance counselor. He told you about the time in April of 2018 when Ava Johnson walked into his office complaining about being bullied. Ava told him she was being made fun of because of her weight. Ava told him she was being called a fat slob in gym class. They would taunt her as she changed and torment her in the hallways and classrooms of Worcester High. Ava told him that the bullying had gotten so bad, that she started skipping calculus class, causing her grades to suffer. Mr. Davis even suspected that Ava was cutting herself because he saw some faint marks on her arm. Now, why is Mr. Davis important? Well, it's not just because he was an employee of the defendant. That is important, but it's what he knew, they knew. When he was on notice, they were on notice. They knew everything but failed to do anything. Now, after hearing all of this, ladies and gentlemen, what did Worcester High School do? They had a nice bulletin board up that said no bullying. They had a nice little prom contract and a single morning PA announcement. That's it, ladies and gentlemen. Seriously. That's it. I mean, my God, a girl told her guidance counselor that she was being called a fat slob. He suspected that she was cutting herself. And they decided to make a morning PA announcement? They failed, ladies and gentlemen. They failed at the most essential job a school and its educators have, and that's to protect its students. Now, when we send our child to school, be it kindergarten all the way up to senior year of high school, we expect them to be in a nurturing and educational environment. That we know. But we undoubtedly expect them to be in a safe environment. And Worcester High School ignored all of that. Now, you saw Worcester High School's code of conduct. They held this up as their shield, as an example of how they protect their students. And this code of conduct defined bullying as the creation of a hostile environment by conduct or by threats, intimidation, or abuse, such as that which would reasonably cause or would reasonably be expected to cause physical injury or emotional harm to a student. Emotional harm to a student. We know that Ava was affected by the names that she was being called. We know she was depressed. She told Mr. Davis that she was feeling bipolar. This is all evidence of emotional harm. Physical injury. Again, Mr. Davis suspected that she was cutting herself. It's all right here. Bullying also would have the effect of unreasonably and substantially interfering with the student's educational performance, opportunities, or mental, emotional, or physical well-being. Well, let's start with educational performance. Again, we know that Ava was skipping calculus class. She was skipping class to avoid the girls and boys that were bullying her, causing her grades to suffer. Mental, emotional, or physical well-being. Again, we know she was depressed. We know she was mentally affected by this bullying and this ridicule and the constant, unrelenting tormenting that she endured for over a year. Ava was undoubtedly bullied. She was a victim of bullying according to Hofstra High School's own code of conduct. Hofstra High School even mentions and outlines what they claim to be inappropriate behavior, such as any violent or bullying behavior, physical, verbal, social, electronic, that intentionally hurts another person, making derogatory or hateful comments toward an individual or group of people, using language that is violent, profane, or discriminatory. She was being called a fat slob. And if Hofstra High School wants to try to say that that doesn't fit in any of these groups, well then shame on them. Because we all know that that is bullying. We all know that that is ridicule. We all know that that is tormenting a 17-year-old girl. Making fun of a girl for her stretch marks? Are you kidding me? This is all inappropriate behavior according to Hofstra High School. And they did nothing about it. So when Hofstra High School is presented with a situation like this, what are they supposed to do? Well, an appropriate school response to level 1 student behaviors, which are those behaviors which are responded to by the teacher witnessing the behaviors, such as verbal reminders, home contact, peer mentoring or counseling, or a parent-school conference. Well, we heard no evidence today whatsoever that indicated any of this happened. We didn't hear any evidence about a parent-school conference. We heard no evidence about peer mentoring or counseling. We heard no evidence of simple verbal reminders. They didn't do anything that they told themselves they had to do. Appropriate school response to level 2 student behaviors which are referred to the administration, which is what happened in this case. Mr. Davis told Adam Golden, the principal of Hofstra High School, about everything that Ava had told him. In those instances, there should be a loss of privileges, restricted access to facilities and or activities, behavior management plan, detentions, or a simple in and out of school suspension. Restricted access to facilities or activities or loss of privileges, we heard no evidence about no one being prohibited from going to that prom. We heard no evidence of any simple detentions, no evidence of an in or out of school suspension, no evidence of a simple mediation technique. Again, they failed. And they didn't follow their own internal policies and guidelines when they needed to. So the question isn't whether or not Ava was bullied. We know Ava was bullied. Hofstra High School doesn't deny that Ava was bullied. The question is whether or not the bullying caused her to commit suicide on the night of June 9th. And we know for a fact that it did. Dr. Billy Jones took the stand today, a highly qualified child and adolescent psychiatrist. She's presented extensively on the topic and written on child and adolescent psychiatry and the problems that occur from adolescent bullying and suicide. Dr. Jones told you that the most substantial primary factor in Ava's suicide was the bullying that occurred for over a year including and most importantly the bullying that happened on the night of June 9th. The night of prom. The night that should be the most special time for any girl her age. Instead of making memories with her friends, she was being ridiculed for the way she looked in her dress. Instead of having fun with her friends and making memories, she was being excluded from the after party with her friends. And as we know, just moments later, she jumped into an oncoming train. Now soon His Honor will instruct you on the law. Her Honor will instruct you on the law. And she will tell you that in order to find Hofstra High School responsible for the death of Ava Johnson, we needed to prove two things. The first, that Hofstra High School, by an affirmative act of negligence, failed to use reasonable care under the circumstances. Well, how much more evidence of negligence do we need? We saw that entire code of conduct and everything that they told themselves they had to do. Detentions, peer counseling, mentoring, loss of privileges, parent-school conferences, calling the parents of the victim. None of that occurred. None of that happened. We heard no evidence whatsoever that Hofstra High School did any of the things that they told themselves they needed to do. And for that, they are undoubtedly negligent. The second question that we needed to answer was whether or not Hofstra High School's negligence was a substantial factor in the death of Ava Johnson. Again, Dr. Billy Jones testified, a highly qualified, board-certified child and adolescent psychiatrist, told you the substantial factor in her death was the bullying that went on for over a year, including, and most importantly, the bullying that occurred at prom. And for that, you should mark yes. Now, after everything we've heard and saw today, it's clear that Ava's death was preventable. Had Hofstra High School done something, anything, to protect Ava Johnson, she would be alive today. Instead, the relentless bullying went on, unrestricted, untethered, within the classrooms and confines of Hofstra High School. And for that, they must be held responsible. They must face the consequences of their carelessness, their callousness, and utter lack of concern for Ava Johnson. Stop signs were everywhere. From the hallways, to calculus class, to gym class, to prom. And they missed them because they never cared to look. Ava Johnson asked her best friend, Jamie Lee, her best friend since 5th grade, for help. But Jamie Lee couldn't offer her help. Ava Johnson went to Blake Davis and the defendant, Hofstra High School, asking for help in the most difficult time of her life. But Hofstra High School didn't help. Ladies and gentlemen, Ava Johnson is now asking for your help. She's asking you to help her in the most difficult time of her life. And for that, hold the defendant, Hofstra High School, responsible for the death of Ava Johnson. Thank you.